She didn't release documents. She didn't name new crimes. But when Jaguar Wright spoke about the renewed conversations surrounding the Epstein files, the internet exploded anyway. Because every time those files trend, something predictable happens. Names circulate, clips resurface, speculation spreads faster than clarification. Jaguar didn't claim insider access. She questioned transparency. She questioned why certain narratives dominate while others disappear. And that's what ignited the reaction. Not proof, not exposure, but perspective. So what did she actually say? What do the publicly released documents really contain? And why does social media treat mentioned the same as accused? Tonight, we're breaking down the commentary, the facts that are publicly known, and the online frenzy that followed. Here, because when elite conversations trend, the noise often drowns out the nuance. Stay with us. When Jaguar Wright addressed the renewed discussion around the Epstein court documents, she didn't present new files. She reacted to what was already circulating. That distinction matters. Over the past few years, various court documents connected to the Epstein case have been unsealed. These documents contain names, but inclusion in documents does not automatically imply wrongdoing. That's where the confusion begins. Jaguar's commentary focused on perception. She argued that when powerful names appear in legal paperwork, even in neutral contexts, public reaction tends to assume guilt before reading context. And she's not wrong about that pattern. When files trend, screenshots circulate faster than explanations. Clips get reposted without full transcripts. Headlines prioritize engagement over nuance. Observers noticed that Jaguar didn't accuse specific celebrities of crimes. She questioned why transparency always feels incomplete. Her core point seemed to be about accountability culture, not direct allegation. But the internet doesn't slow down for nuance. The moment her commentary gained traction, timelines filled with speculation, people began asking, who's on the list? What does it mean? Why weren't we told sooner? That's where misunderstanding grows. Being named in a document can mean many things. Witness testimony, contact records, third-party mentions, scheduling logs, contextual references. It does not automatically equal participation in wrongdoing. Legal analysts have repeatedly emphasized this distinction in mainstream reporting. However, online discourse often collapses that nuance. Jaguar's remarks highlighted that collapse. She pointed out how quickly online audiences jump from mentioned to implicated, and that leap is dangerous. Observers say this is the pattern every time high-profile legal files resurface. Names trend, screenshots circulate, context disappears, accusations multiply, clarifications struggle to catch up. The Epstein case remains a deeply disturbing and serious matter. But public conversations about associated names require care. Jaguar's commentary, while dramatic, centered more on media framing than direct criminal claims. She asked why some narratives dominate headlines, while legal disclaimers rarely trend. That question sparked debate. Critics accused her of fueling speculation. Supporters said she was questioning selective transparency. The reality sits somewhere in the middle. Public documents exist, media outlets report them, but interpretation varies wildly depending on platform. Observers also noticed something else. When celebrity names appear in legal paperwork, even without accusation, brand damage can occur instantly. Sponsors monitor trends. Studios monitor backlash. Reputation teams activate quietly. Even neutral mentions can create public relations turbulence. Jaguar's broader argument seemed to focus on how information is filtered. Who decides which names get amplified? Who controls context? Why does nuance disappear once a story goes viral? Those are fair media questions, but they can easily blur into insinuation if not handled carefully. And that's the line commentators must navigate. By the end of her remarks, one thing was clear. The internet reaction was louder than the commentary itself. Because once high-profile legal documents trend, speculation becomes inevitable. The challenge isn't stopping conversation, it's protecting accuracy within it. When conversations about the Epstein court documents resurface, One phrase spreads faster than anything else. Named in the files. It sounds explosive, but legally, it can mean a dozen different things. After Jaguar Wright commented on the renewed discussion, many online users immediately assumed that appearing in court paperwork equals implication. That's not how legal documents work. Court filings often include witness statements, deposition transcripts, references made by third parties, contact logs, scheduling mentions, contextual name drops. Being mentioned does not automatically mean being accused of wrongdoing. That distinction is critical. Legal experts have repeatedly emphasized this whenever new Epstein-related documents are unsealed. In civil cases especially, names can appear simply because someone was referenced in conversation, not because they were charged or investigated, but social media rarely differentiates. Observers note that online discourse tends to collapse legal nuance into emotional reaction. If a name appears, then the assumption becomes suspicion. Suspicion becomes narrative. Narrative becomes trending topic. And once a name trends in connection with a high-profile case, perception shifts instantly, regardless of legal status. That's the power of association. Jaguar's commentary seemed to highlight that tension. She questioned how information is released and framed, but the internet often interprets commentary as confirmation. There's a difference between saying, "Why is this name in the documents?" and saying, "This person committed a crime." One is inquiry, the other is allegation, and conflating the two can cause reputational harm. Observers say every time sealed documents are unsealed in high-profile cases, confusion spreads for three main reasons. Legal language is complex. Headlines are simplified. Context gets clipped for engagement. Court documents are not written for viral consumption. They're written for legal proceedings, which means they often include broad contextual information, even if that information is unrelated to wrongdoing. For example, if a witness says, "I attended a party where X was present," that name enters the transcript. That doesn't equal criminal involvement. But in the age of screenshots, that nuance disappears. Jaguar's remarks sparked renewed interest in how media outlets report on these documents. Mainstream reporting typically clarifies, no charges filed, no allegations made. Name appears in context only, but once social platforms extract the name without that clarification, speculation grows. Observers believe this is where media literacy becomes essential. Public documents are public, but interpretation matters. Legal analysts often remind audiences, innocent people can appear in documents without wrongdoing. That's how testimony works. That's how legal transcripts function. But trending culture rarely slows down for those details. Once a celebrity's name appears near a controversial case, the digital narrative can become self-sustaining. Sponsors monitor sentiment. Publicists issue prepared statements. Fans debate morality. Even if the legal record contains no accusation, Jaguar's commentary, in this context, seems to sit at the intersection of frustration and media skepticism. She questioned transparency and narrative control, but questioning is not the same as confirming. Observers say this distinction is the most important part of the conversation. Legal presence is not equal to legal guilt. Mention is not equal to implication. Association is not equal to accusation. Without those guardrails, online discourse turns into trial by algorithm. And algorithms reward outrage more than accuracy. That's why each new wave of document releases creates a cycle. Shock speculation, clarification, silence, repeat. The challenge isn't discussing documents. It's discussing them responsibly. Because reputational damage can occur even when no wrongdoing exists. And once perception shifts, correction rarely trends as strongly as accusation. Once Jaguar Wright's reaction started circulating, something predictable happened. Clips were shortened. Headlines were intensified. Thumbnails became dramatic. And context? It started disappearing. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The algorithm rewards reaction, not restraint. When conversations around the Epstein court documents trend, Platforms detect engagement spikes. Engagement equals profit, and profit favors emotion. Observers say social media amplification follows a consistent formula. Step 1. A commentator reacts. Step 2. A clip is extracted. Step 3. The clip is captioned with urgency. Step 4. The audience fills in missing details. Step 5. Assumptions go viral. By the time clarifications arrive, the emotional reaction has already settled in. That's the amplification effect. Jaguar's commentary may have focused on transparency and framing, but once her name became attached to Epstein files in headlines, the algorithm did the rest. The problem isn't discussion. The problem is distortion through acceleration. Observers note that when serious legal matters trend, three dangerous shortcuts occur online: headline reading without article reading, screenshot sharing without transcript review, emotional reaction without legal understanding. That's not unique to this case. It's structural to social media. When a celebrity name appears in any high-profile legal document, the association alone generates clicks. Clicks generate revenue. Revenue incentivizes amplification. Amplification rarely includes nuance. Jaguar's remarks entered that ecosystem, and once they did, the conversation shifted from what was said to who is implicated. That shift is subtle but powerful, because implicated suggests guilt, while mentioned may simply reflect context. Observers believe that most online debates don't begin with malice. They begin with confusion. Confusion combined with urgency becomes misinformation. Misinformation combined with repetition becomes perceived truth. And perceived truth spreads faster than verified fact. Legal experts consistently remind audiences, court documents are layered. Names appear for various procedural reasons. Inclusion does not equal criminal involvement, but those disclaimers rarely trend. Jaguar's critics argue that any public discussion risks fueling speculation. Her supporters argue that asking questions about powerful networks is necessary. Both perspectives exist, but the algorithm magnifies extremes. Extremes outperform moderation. Moderation doesn't trend. Outrage does. Observers say that when names from legal documents start trending, public relations teams often enter monitoring mode. Not necessarily because wrongdoing occurred, but because perception can spiral beyond control. Even if later clarified, association can linger, and lingering perception can affect brand deals, public invitations, future interviews, media framing. That's the power of digital association. Jaguar's commentary may have aimed at transparency critique, but once social media accelerates the clip cycle, intent becomes secondary to interpretation. Interpretation spreads, and interpretation evolves. Observers also point out something rarely discussed. The internet often treats curiosity as confirmation. Asking, "Why is this name here?" can morph into, "They must be involved." That leap is fueled by repetition. Once a phrase appears enough times, it feels established, even if legally unsupported. That's algorithmic psychology. The more we see something, the more believable it feels. And platforms are designed to maximize visibility, not accuracy. This is why media literacy becomes critical in high-profile legal discussions. Reading full context matters. Understanding procedural language matters. Distinguishing between allegation, mention, and conviction matters. Because once reputations are digitally linked to serious cases, separation becomes difficult. Observers believe this is the real tension beneath Jaguar's reaction. Not exposure, not confirmation, but amplification. Amplification without guardrails. The algorithm doesn't pause to verify nuance. It prioritizes velocity. And velocity changes perception before verification can catch up. That's the environment we're operating in. And it's bigger than one commentator. It's systemic. Here's something most people don't see. Before public statements, before clarifications, before fact-check threads, there's monitoring. The moment a celebrity's name begins trending alongside a high-profile legal case, internal systems activate. not because guilt is assumed, but because perception moves faster than reality. After Jaguar Wright's reaction circulated, online discussion intensified. And whenever names trend in connection to controversial files, three groups start watching immediately: publicists, brand managers, legal advisors, not to control truth, but to assess risk. Observers say reputational risk doesn't require wrongdoing. It requires association. Association can shift sentiment instantly. Once a name appears in proximity to a serious case, even contextually, public emotion often spikes before legal understanding does. That emotional spike is measurable. Engagement numbers climb, search traffic increases. Sentiment analysis tools flag volatility. Yes, sentiment analysis. Major public figures operate inside ecosystems where public reaction is tracked in real time, not because they're hiding something, but because their brand value depends on public trust. If sentiment dips sharply, partnerships can wobble. Sponsors don't wait for legal clarification. They monitor trends. Studios don't wait for final rulings. They assess public mood. That's the difference between legal reality and reputational reality. Legal reality requires evidence. Reputational reality reacts to perception, and perception spreads instantly. Observers note that when names appear in trending discussions around serious cases, even if only referenced in documents without accusation, the following often occurs quietly: crisis meetings, prepared statements drafted but not released, legal reviews of online commentary, strategic silence assessments, because sometimes saying nothing is safer than fueling conversation. But silence can also be misinterpreted. That's the tightrope. Respond too aggressively, you amplify. Stay silent, people speculate. Jaguar's commentary added fuel to a broader cultural conversation about transparency and power. But once her reaction entered viral circulation, individual names, whether contextual or not, became part of the engagement machine. And the machine doesn't differentiate between legal nuance and headline drama. Observers say reputational impact unfolds in layers. Layer 1, immediate emotional reaction. Layer 2, social media debates. Layer 3, media coverage referencing online discourse. Layer 4, lingering digital association. Even if Layer 1 fades, Layer 4 remains searchable. Searchability is the modern scar. Even if later clarified, association can live in algorithmic memory. And algorithmic memory resurfaces during new interviews, future projects, award seasons, career milestones. The question isn't whether someone committed wrongdoing. The question becomes, why is their name connected to this story? That's how association works. Jaguar's reaction, like many commentary moments, intersected with that dynamic. She questioned framing and transparency. But online ecosystems don't isolate nuance. They merge commentary with speculation. Observers say this is why high-profile legal discussions must be handled carefully in media spaces, because once a name trends, correction rarely trends equally. Reputational recovery doesn't go viral. Outrage does. And once public emotion attaches to a narrative, even if unsupported by charges, it becomes part of digital folklore. That folklore can influence casting decisions, brand partnerships, public trust, even if legally irrelevant. That's the harsh reality of trending culture. The internet doesn't wait for verdicts. It reacts to visibility. Jaguar's commentary may have aimed at systemic critique, but systemic critique in viral form often transforms into individual suspicion, and that's where caution becomes essential. Because being mentioned in legal documents is not the same as being accused, and being accused is not the same as being charged, and being charged is not the same as being convicted. Each step matters. But online, those distinctions blur quickly. Observers believe the most powerful lesson here isn't about any specific celebrity. It's about how fragile reputational ecosystems are once trending begins. Trending is neutral, interpretation is not. When serious legal documents are unsealed, they don't arrive as viral posts. They arrive as dense legal text, pages, transcripts, procedural language. So how does that turn into trending celebrity names? Selection. Media outlets make editorial decisions about what to highlight, not necessarily to mislead, but to prioritize relevance and readership. When Jaguar Wright reacted to discussions about the Epstein files, her commentary entered a media ecosystem already primed for attention, and attention has rules. Observers note that media framing typically follows 3 filters: public recognition, emotional impact, engagement potential. If a document includes dozens of names, only a few will headline. Why? Because audience familiarity drives clicks. A recognizable name trends faster than an unfamiliar one. That's not conspiracy. That's economics. But economics influences perception. If certain names appear repeatedly in headlines, even in neutral contexts, public association strengthens. Meanwhile, legal disclaimers often appear deeper in articles, buried below the headline, after the emotional hook. That's where nuance lives. But nuance doesn't trend as easily as shock. Observers say this creates a distorted experience. The headline suggests proximity to controversy. The article clarifies lack of charges, but many readers never reach the clarification. That gap fuels misunderstanding. Jaguar's commentary tapped into that tension. She questioned narrative control. But narrative control in media isn't always centralized. It's decentralized. Different outlets frame differently. Some emphasize context. Some emphasize impact. Some emphasize urgency. The result? Fragmented public understanding. Observers believe that when high-profile legal discussions trend, there are 2 parallel stories: the legal story and the headline story. The legal story is procedural. The headline story is emotional. Emotion spreads faster. That's why certain names get amplified while others remain footnotes. Amplification doesn't necessarily imply guilt. It implies recognizability, and recognizability increases engagement. But engagement isn't accuracy, that's the distinction. Jaguar's remarks questioned who controls narrative framing, but in modern media, narrative framing is shaped by algorithms, audience behavior, platform incentives, editorial judgment. It's layered, not centralized. Observers also note that when a celebrity's name trends in connection to controversial documents, the story often shifts from "what does the document say?" to "what does this mean for their image?" That shift moves the conversation away from legal detail and into cultural speculation. Speculation sustains traffic. Traffic sustains revenue. Revenue sustains repetition, and repetition shapes perception. Even if later articles clarify that no accusations were made, the initial headline impression can linger. That lingering impression is powerful, because first exposure shapes memory. Psychologists call this anchoring. The first narrative you encounter becomes your baseline. Corrections must work harder to overwrite it. Observers say this is why responsible framing matters. When legal documents involve serious crimes, this careless association can harm individuals not accused of wrongdoing. But withholding public documents entirely creates suspicion. So media operates in tension, transparency versus responsibility. Jaguar's commentary sat inside that tension. She questioned transparency, but transparency requires careful interpretation. Observers believe the healthiest approach to trending legal discussions is layered reading. Read beyond headlines. Distinguish mention from allegation. Separate commentary from confirmation. Because once a narrative solidifies in public consciousness, correction becomes nearly impossible. And in the digital age, reputation moves at the speed of assumption. By now, one thing should be clear. This was never just about Jaguar Wright. And it was never just about a list of names. It was about trust. Trust in media. Trust in context. Trust in how we interpret information when it moves at viral speed. When serious legal documents trend, the public reaction often unfolds faster than the public understanding. Names circulate, screenshots spread, headlines intensify, but nuance rarely keeps pace. Observers say the most dangerous part of digital culture isn't misinformation, it's acceleration. Acceleration compresses complexity. Legal documents are complex. Context is layered. But viral conversations simplify everything into binary conclusions. Guilty or innocent, involved or exposed, hidden or revealed. Reality is rarely that clean. Jaguar's reaction tapped into frustration about elite transparency. That frustration resonates with many people. But frustration and proof are not the same thing. That distinction matters more than ever. Because once public perception attaches to a narrative, it becomes difficult to detach it, even if later clarified, even if legally unsupported, even if context changes everything. Observers believe this is the modern media paradox. We demand transparency, but we process it emotionally. We want full disclosure, but we skim headlines. We say we care about facts, but we share clips. That's not judgment. It's behavioral reality, and platforms amplify behavior. The Epstein case is serious and deeply disturbing. It deserves careful legal discussion. But careful discussion doesn't trend as easily as explosive association. Jaguar's commentary ignited conversation. But conversation must carry responsibility. Being mentioned in court documents does not automatically mean criminal involvement. Being discussed online does not equal legal guilt. Being trending does not equal verified wrongdoing. Those lines must remain clear. Observers say the deeper issue here isn't about any single celebrity. It's about how we handle powerful information. Do we pause? Do we read? Do we differentiate between allegation, mention, charge, conviction? Or do we collapse them into one narrative? The digital age has removed gatekeepers. That creates freedom, but it also creates risk. Risk of misinterpretation, risk of reputational harm, risk of emotional escalation without evidence. Jaguar's critics argue she fuels speculation. Her supporters argue she challenges power structures. Both reactions exist, but the healthiest outcome is critical thinking. Because once a name trends beside a serious crime, even contextually, the reputational impact can outlive the clarification. And correction rarely trends. That's why responsible framing matters. Transparency and fairness must coexist. The public deserves access to legal records, but individuals deserve accurate interpretation. Observers believe this moment isn't about exposing secrets. It's about examining how quickly we assign meaning. The algorithm doesn't care about nuance, but we can. And that's the difference between viral reaction and informed conversation. Hashtag media literacy, hashtag context matters, hashtag responsible discussion at Jaguar Wright. Like, subscribe, and share.